right, so with that out of the way, welcome everyone back to another episode of Herbal Prepper Live. Our show airs live every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. Eastern and 4 p.m. Pacific. Today is Sunday, July 16th, 2017. Welcome to everyone who's tuning in live this evening. I see several new faces, so that's wonderful to see in the chat room here. I also want to welcome everyone who is going to obviously be listening to this later on when they download it. So thank you for downloading this and checking in with us tonight. I'm going to be covering the second part of our show from last week. Last week we had on our good friend Chuck Hudson from the Medic Shack, and we were talking about first aid kits, and he gave everyone a ton of great resources to find some wonderful and affordable, like ready-made first aid kits, and of course like supplies, like if you want to build your own kits. And so we looked at sort of the conventional side there, and of course he always has tons of wonderful information to share. So we didn't end up really getting to the herbal items that would be in a kit, so that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. So we're also going to be talking about some of the considerations for storing your kits and why that may influence your decision as to what kind of remedies to carry and what to put in what type of kit. All right, so for those who are listening here live, if you have something that you want to share, if you have a nagging question, please do join us in the chat room here. There's always a great conversation going on there. So join us in the chat room on prepperbroadcasting.com and type your question in there. Or better yet, please do take advantage of this being a live broadcast. Call into the show. The phone number to do so is 347-202-0228. Again, that number is 347-202-0228. And remember to press 1 so that we know that you are waiting to come on the call. All right. So just a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. If you are listening over Blog Talk, why don't you come on over and join us here on Prepper Broadcasting? This is where we have the live chat room. This is where I'm paying attention over here. And while you're over on Prepper Broadcasting checking out the site, please do look at all of the other hosts, all of the other shows that are here, all the archived episodes. There's tons of information. I don't care what topic you're looking for. Someone has probably covered it. Also, check out the Prepper Broadcasting bookshop. You'll find both of my books, Prepper's Natural Medicine and Prepping for a Pandemic, available there. You can also get my books anywhere, anywhere books are sold. I would love to say at your local bookstore, but I'm not sure that many towns even have a local bookstore anymore. But if you do, please do stop in. And if they don't have either Prepper's Natural Medicine or Prepping for a Pandemic, they can certainly order it for you. And if you are feeling generous, you could donate a copy to your local library. All right, so other things that I need to mention. There are 3 courses available for registration right now on herbalprepper.com. There is the Herbal Skills Intensive. There is also the Essentials of Herbal Practice. Those are 2 required courses for the Herbal Certification Program. There's also a Burn Care course. The Burn Care course is on sale. It's not $40, it's $30 because I'm giving that course a very much needed upgrade. The material is still essentially the same, but that was my very first online course that I put together, and I'm just very wordy, and it could be a much easier course to get through. So I am giving it a major facelift, but during that time, the old version, the original version of the course, that is available, but at a discounted tuition for you if you would like to take advantage of that. Let's see. The other thing also, just if you go to herbalprepper.com, if you want to see each of the courses that are available, just click on the button that says shop. It's not really a shop, but that's the I still haven't figured out how to change the word shop. I haven't had a moment. I have spent this whole week working on course content, and making videos because I've been putting together PowerPoint presentations, and I want them to be good. I mean, PowerPoint presentations can get a little dull, after a while. So, you want to make sure that they're done right so that they stay engaging, and I'm relying heavily upon them. So that's what I've been doing all week long, and I know that I am behind on some of my postings on herbalprepper.com, some of the blog articles, but I want to make sure that the course content is up, that it's available, and that it's as good as it can be. So I used to do a lot of these lectures that I'm doing through the PowerPoints. I used to do them live. It was taking up a lot of time. In this way, they'll be standardized, and it'll cut down on, I think, it'll certainly free up my schedule to get on to other projects that are desperately overdue. So that's what I've been doing all week long. I should be caught up by the end of next week, which is like one of those like awesome things I finally get to say. I'm finally going to get caught up with stuff. Like the end is in sight. So all right, let's see here. Oh, I want to remind people, in case you didn't hear last week or the week before, I know that some people, not everybody, but some people who use Internet Explorer cannot easily access herbalprepper.com. I am very sorry. I can't help it. It's an Internet Explorer issue, and each version of it has its own settings and their own problems, and I can't possibly fix all of them for everybody. I would highly recommend, because what is it, Internet Explorer is absolutely clunky and a rotten uh, sort of a web browser, that you download something like Chrome or Firefox, or if you really like Microsoft products, there's also Microsoft Edge, which is now their replacement for that. That's what's coming out with Microsoft 10, they now have Edge. That's their new browser. Internet Explorer has been old and clunky for a long time, and I just can't begin to troubleshoot each version's problems for people. But it is what it is. So hopefully that message will get out. All right. Now the other thing is, please also go to herbalprepper.com, sign up for my website. I will be getting back to that newsletter this week. I just was under a bit of a scheduling deadline to get some videos done. So I will be getting the newsletter back out this week, probably Tuesday. All right, so that's all the housekeeping. So that's done. Let's go ahead. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to start talking about herbal remedies that are appropriate for your first aid kit, and how you can construct your own herbal first aid kit. So we're going to let the station go pay some bills, and we will be right back. All right, so we're back. And just as a reminder, if you have questions, please call into the show. The phone number to do so is 347-202-0228. And remember to press 1 so that we know that you're there. We don't want you just hanging there for forever, and we don't even know that you're waiting to come on the line. So please press 1 if you are looking to ask a question. All right, so every 6 months or so, normally every 6 months, um, I'll do sort of a review, a seasonal review of my first aid kits, bug out bags, um, anything that I might happen to store in the car for emergencies, and kind of seasonal, getting ready for all the cold months and all the hot months. Well, I'm a little late this year, but it's getting done. So um, the biggest problem that I have when it comes to putting these kits together is I just want to take everything with me. I really do. I want to take everything with me. And the first like kit that I ever put together, I was going to be ready for anything. I was going to have every single tincture, every single powder, every single tea, I wanted everything. Um, because you never know what might happen. And, you know, the thing is that odds are most of that stuff would not be necessary. And, I mean, not for, let's say, going into a bug out bag. My first kit took up the entire bug out bag, the entire thing. Like, I mean, it was just a backpack filled with herbal stuff and of course, bandages and other first aid equipment. And, that's fine if you are, let's say you're permanently relocating and you've got, lots of people carrying lots of stuff. You're in your car, you're leaving, you're gone and all that. But I mean, if you are looking for something that's in your 72-hour bag, I was just, when I was packing my bug out bag, I don't even have room for clothes. I got all this herbal stuff in here. And after a while, I'm like, I have to stop calling it a bug out bag or a good bag. I need to start calling it a 72-hour bag because I'm trying to stuff everything I own in this bag. And a bug out bag is not intended for you to survive indefinitely on. It's intended to get you from point A to point B, so that you can evacuate and have some necessities on you to get you from point A to point B. So I started just referring to this as my 72-hour bag because that's at least, I mean, it's a silly thing, but just saying that, okay, I'm packing for 72 hours and that's it. I don't have to take the entire, I don't have to take every single herb I own. It was sort of like I was traveling with like a mobile herbal clinic in my backpack, if I wanted to take that. And that's really unnecessary, at least for the vast majority of things. I mean, because, I mean, when you need a first aid kit, I mean, most of your everyday kind of issues that come up, these are things that you're not, you know, how should I put this? You're going to be treating at home because somebody, maybe they had a skinned knee, there's an abrasion, or someone has, they have a headache, or they have a cut that looks like it's starting to get infected, but we still have a hospital nearby. So obviously, we're looking for a kit that is going to do a little bit more than that, but not take the entire herbal clinic with you. So we're just talking about a mobile kit here. So what I've done, to sort of arrange things in my own life is I have a kit that is at home. That is my big kit. If I really needed to, go to somebody, I have this one big bag and a smaller bag, and it carries, it's more like a trauma bag, so to speak. So I have that, but that's really, like that stays here at home, for the most part. Um, like if I had the opportunity to go attend a birth, most of the stuff in there is not necessary, but the stuff that's in the smaller bag, I would take that with me. Um, I also have another kit that goes in my car, which is a little bit smaller than that large at-home kit. My home kit's kind of like a home medicine chest, but it's in a bag, so it technically is mobile, but it's not something I toss in a bug out bag or a 72-hour bag. So then, of course, I have this much smaller kit now. Um, this is the 72-hour kit, and that's what I'm focusing on tonight. And you can certainly take this and expand on it. You can make this your own, add something that, I mean, if you've got a particular health problem and I'm not addressing that specifically tonight, that's fine. Just add it in there because you know that you might need that during those 72 hours. If you have certain needs that need to be met on a daily basis, then add that into this kit, certainly. Let me see here. So let's start off with this. There are some things to consider when you're packing your kit. And some of these things are less of a concern with pharmaceuticals because they have a lot of petroleum-based products and a lot of products that have synthetic preservatives and such in them. So they don't tend to go they don't tend to, like, for instance, with some herbal products, let's say salves, you're dealing with oils, they may go rancid. They may, after a while, if they don't have enough, let's say, vitamin E in there to prevent rancidity. And when you smell an old oil, you know that smell. I mean, it's just not something that I care to, to use, but um, you can certainly prevent that. But anyway, um, you need to be aware of what is the shelf life of all the items that are in there. Is there anything in there that's heat sensitive? Is there anything in your kit that if it were tossed around, like just if it were tossed in the back of a vehicle, or if you're, um, let's say you were bugging out on foot and you're taking, some back roads or whatever, and, something happens and you have to, you throw your bag down and you start taking your stuff out to get to work. Is there anything in your kit? And I say this because herbalists, we love our glass bottles for our tinctures. We love our glass and glass jars. I mean, glass is beautiful and it's wonderful and it's inert and it is not going to leach anything, like not going to leach any chemicals into your herbal formulas, especially something that's like alcohol that could um, end up leaching from cheap plastics. So I know the herbalists, we love our glass, but is there anything in your kit that would be breakable? And if it is, what's inside of it? Is it something that's going to leak? So let's say you have a small glass jar, but it has wound powder in it. That may not, that's not necessarily, it's going to get everywhere, but it's not like a tincture bottle that, let's say you crack that open and now you've got alcohol going all over the place. What else might it ruin? So you have to kind of think about that. A lot of really neat ways to put these together are, if you look, just about any store like Walmart or Target or um, any place that's got like a cosmetic section in it, in these department stores like Kohl's or whatever you might have out your way, um, you'll find like these travel kits, like for all of your bathroom toiletries with all the zippered compartments. Those are really, really handy because you can zip them up and, just like if you like for like travel shampoos and travel things like that. Um, if you use these zippered pouches that they're in, if something does spill, if you had, let's say you made an herbal lotion, something like an antifungal foot lotion or something, and you had that in a little lotion jar in one of these bags that's designed for toiletries, then you could just zip them up and, they're not going to be leaking everywhere. So you might want to get a bag like that, and they fold, they open up so you can either hang them or they open up and they're flat. And most of the time it's clear plastic so you can see what's in all the various compartments. So that's one way that you can put them together, and then you can put them in other bags, larger bags, if you want. If you want to carry um, multiple bags, you could. I prefer just one single bag um, for my 72-hour kit. Um, Let me see some other considerations there. As a as a replacement for the glass bottles, and I have to give credit to Sam Kaufman of the Human Path for this tip, which is to get the HDPE bottles. They're these brown Nalgene bottles. So you can order them on Amazon. Um, and if you type a search for like, it's HDPE amber rounds, and they'll be by milliliter. So either 30 milliliter, 60 milliliter, um, and so on. So, but that's basically 1 ounce, 2 ounces, 4 ounces, 8 ounces, but they're by milliliter. And Waldo in the chat room, I have that listed here. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about poultices, activated charcoal, clay, and plantain. That's all in here. We're getting to it. Um, but oh, let's see, where was I? So there are other things to think of when you have, let's say, salves. They can be wonderful things to have in your kit. If you're concerned about things going rancid, it's not a big deal. Add plenty of vitamin E and it shouldn't go rancid. You can also use oils that are not known for going rancid, like coconut oil. And, as long as it's as long as it is under like 70 something degrees, it's not going to melt anyway. But if you are concerned that it's going to melt, let's say you have it like and it's in your car, kicking around, because if this is like in your bug out bag and it's in your house, it's probably going to be room temperature, and I'm not too worried about that. But let's say you did put something in your car kit and you're driving around and whatnot. Um, you don't necessarily want those things to melt. So um, what you can do to keep them from getting really soupy and thin is add more thickeners. Like if especially if you live in a hot area. I usually make my salves with about 8 ounces of oil and 1 tablespoon worth of beeswax pastilles, or it's 1 ounce of beeswax shavings. About 1 tablespoon of the pastilles and 1 ounce of pastilles or shavings is about equivalent there. So that's the ratio that I use. But if I lived down south, I'd probably be using more than that. You can also add other thickeners. You can use beeswax, coconut, yeah, not coconut, cocoa butter, because that's quite hard even when it's warm, or lanolin. And these are thickeners, and they're going to help keep them stable. Um, so that would be one way of helping your salves stay better, especially where heat might be an issue. I really haven't run into any problems with cold weather, with anything being sensitive to cold in my kits, and which is a good thing because I live up north. But it's heat that tends to be the issue there. So some of the things that I wanted to make sure that I dealt with in this kit and still keep it small. I needed to have something for general aches and pains. I needed to have something in case of a sprain. Um, if you've ever like walked out on land that has not been tilled over, that's not been like um, oh, that hasn't had like a lawn installed on it, and it's not all perfectly flat. Like whenever we go up to Maine, like it's kind of just raw land, and when you walk around up there, the land is not exactly very even, and there's lots of these little divots and pockets, and it'd be very, very easy for one of us to just, twist an ankle, sprain an ankle. Just very, very easy, and it's a very common injury. So it needs something for sprains. Bug bites, very, very common thing to have to deal with a bug bite. That could be anything from, a horse fly bite, which is pretty nasty, to a spider bite. Let's say mosquitoes are really just annoying things, but some people are more sensitive to mosquito bites than others, and sometimes they can really flare up and they're just very uncomfortable, nasty. Um, Let me see here. Other things I wanted to make sure wounds and wound care. So with that, we've got different types of wounds. You've got abrasions that are sort of a surface thing happening, which might happen, let's say, if you're on your motorcycle and you're only wearing a t-shirt and you wipe out and you go skidding across the cement, well, then you're gonna have a very nasty abrasion on your arms there. Um, there are punctures. You have a puncture wound, and that needs to be handled differently. Those are deep, the wounds go in rather deep. And of course, there are wounds where you're bleeding. So they need to be handled a little differently. Then there's burns, and burns could be your average sunburn. They could be something more serious, let's say, um, a pot of water tipped over, now you have second-degree burns or third-degree burns. Now, obviously, if you have anything beyond a first-degree burn, which is, most likely a sunburn, although sunburn can get to second degree. And I should also point out, um, most people don't, in the medical field, don't use the terms first, second, and third degree, but that's still sort of permeated the, That's sort of permeated our language. So if you're in the medical field, they talk about the different thicknesses of burns. But the point is that usually your less serious surface type of burns, those are usually radiation burns, which are sunburns. Um, if they're more serious and then you have blisters, or if if you are really going beyond the skin and you see muscle tissue, those are very serious. And if you absolutely have if you have the option of getting to a medical facility, that's where you need to go. I wouldn't want to DIY this. I had to do it one time when someone fell into a fire pit and we were camping, and an ambulance was not going to be coming for some time. But it's not something I ever want to have to repeat. Um, but you still need to be able to at least address it when it happens. And of course, we are looking at those scenarios of what happens if, help is not on the way. So we have to have a way to deal with that. Skin irritations and rashes, accidental poisoning, dehydration, nausea, diarrhea, and also if you are bugging out, if you have your 72-hour bag with you, and you are hoofing it somewhere, odds are, you're staying overnight outside in a tent someplace if you're looking for cover in woods or whatnot. If that's your scenario, it's actually quite easy to get your cornea scratched. Fiddling around in the dark and whatnot. You don't necessarily see a twig or a branch, or things end up in your eyes just from being outside and whatnot. So we need to be able to deal with that because it's a very common injury. So that's a whole lot of things. That's a lot of things. So what I'm looking for is to try to get the most uses out of single items, as well as try to tailor like a formula to handle many things. So the first thing that I had mentioned, general aches and pains, and I I've been experimenting for the past few months with a tincture that I use, white willow bark. You could use meadow sweet. If you don't have a willow tree nearby, a white willow that you can get the bark from, or if you had, I mean, I order mine, but I get it in big bags and whatnot. But if you want to, you can also grow a flower called meadow sweet that also has salicin in it, the same thing that we're going for here with the white willow. Um, you could use either one of them. Um, I've been using white willow and California poppy, cramp bark, turmeric, licorice, lemon balm, and rose petals. And that whole mix right there is um, is good for all over aches and pains, pains in the joints, headaches, migraines. Um, it's been very helpful for all sorts of joint and muscle pains. So general aches and pains. Now, the other thing is that if you're concerned about, giving something like that to children, because white willow and meadowsweet, they contain salicin, which is the active, well, I shouldn't say it's the active ingredient. The active ingredient in aspirin is acetyl salicylic acid. It is a synthetic version of salicin, which when you ingest it becomes salicylic acid. So it's not exactly the same thing, but it's supposed to work sort of the same way. Um, but it is a synthetic reproduction of what you find in these plants. You're not supposed to give aspirin to kids if they have an active sign of infection because that could lead to Reye syndrome. So you don't want to have that in there. If you're going to be giving this to a child who also has signs of a viral infection. However, you're not giving this for a viral infection. You're giving this for like aches and pains, headache. Oh, you fell down, you sprained your ankle. Oh, you broke your leg, or you have a fractured, forearm, or because you fell out of a tree, or, there's something that's causing them a pain. We're not talking about, they look like they have a viral infection, or they look like they're coming down with something. So let's give them something for the aches and the pains. If you want to use it for that, leave the white willow or the meadowsweet out and just use the California poppy, cramp bark, turmeric, licorice, and lemon balm and rose petals. You can also do, because I was experimenting with this too, um, you can make a tincture out of the willow bark, the California poppy, and the cramp bark, and then a glycerite out of the turmeric, licorice, lemon balm, and rose petals, and then you mix the two together. And it's not as alcoholic because now you have a glycerite in there, and it's a little bit sweeter and it's a little bit more palatable. And I think it works. I think it works fairly well. So, um, plenty of options. You can certainly play around with those. Um, if you wanted to make that more simple, then, I mean, you could just do something like the California poppy and the cramp bark, and the lemon balm is in there, lemon balm or rose petals. They're in there for um, helping to keep the person calm, because when you are in pain, if you become excitable, that sensation of fear and anxiety actually heightens your experience of the pain. So we want to kind of calm them down just a bit. So that's why they are in there. The licorice is one of those synergists, and it helps to make the entire formula a little bit more effective. And it also tastes really nice, and it helps to sweeten up the flavor a bit, um, which is nice next to turmeric, because turmeric is a bitter. It's a bitter herb, and even though it's wonderful for it's as an anti-inflammatory, it does have that bitter taste. So the licorice does kind of help to sweeten that up a bit. Um, cramp bark. Um, it's one of those herbs that sort of gets pigeonholed as a woman's herb, for menstrual cramps, but it's a muscle relaxant. That's going to work all over the body, not just, for menstrual cramps. So that's why that's in there. California poppy also for pain relief, and the white willows, as I said, is very, very similar to aspirin. So you can make your decision. You don't have to put the white willow or the meadowsweet in. You can leave that out if aspirin is an issue for you. If you are allergic to aspirin, then just leave them out. Use the rest of them or just a few of them. But the lemon balm and rose petals are only in there to help keep the person calm, because um, we want to lower their anxiety, because anxiety will cause their pain sensation to be much more acute. So sprains. There's a couple of options here. So one, you can make a comfrey and an arnica salve. I mean, if it's just a quick, oh, I just twisted my ankle, but they could still bear weight on it, and it's just really, it's just a little bit sore. You could certainly just, put this salve on it, elevate the ankle, and it should be fine. You can also add this as a, now what would be the proper, is this a, well, hold on one second. This is it's like a poultice, and but you're going to package this up for your first aid kit. Um, what you're going to do is you're going to take comfrey and arnica, just like you would for the salve. And comfrey is wonderful to help to heal the tissue, and arnica is a wonderful pain reliever. You only want to use arnica when the skin is intact. I mean, if you have broken skin, you don't use it, but if the skin is intact, you can. So comfrey and arnica together, and you can get one of these large press and seal tea bags, and you can order them and get the real big size, and you can fill them up. You get an iron, you press them closed, um, and then what you can do is you will get these herbs wet, so you're going to have a bottle of water, some kind of clean water that's with you, and you need to wet the herbs, and then you'll put them on the ankle and then get some vet wrap around that and secure it in place. Normally, if you were at home, what I would say is you're going to make like a plaster or a poultice, and you're going to use those herbs, and you'll get them directly on the affected joint, and then wrap it with plastic wrap, and then tape that up, because the plastic wrap is going to keep it from dripping everywhere. And if you're at home and you've got your ankle propped up somewhere, you don't want to get all the drips from the comfrey and such, onto your furniture. So you put some plastic wrap around it, and then you put your compression bandage on. But if you're just, I mean, if you're bugging out, you really don't need to worry about that. So just put some vet wrap around that. All right, so now bug bites. Again, a couple of options here. Um, I made a plantain salve this spring that was just out of this world. I had so much of it in my yard. But I made this plantain salve and I used some tea tree and peppermint essential oils that I put in it. And plantain is wonderful to help draw out whatever venom might be in a bite. So whether you have a bee sting or whether you have, oh, let's say black flies or something that's very uncomfortable, you can put this on. If you find it just growing around, I mean, I have narrow leaf plantain growing in my yard, but I think broadleaf plantain is a little bit more common. But if you can get it, you mash it up, and if you can mash it up, some people will chew it and they call that a spit poultice. It's not the best way to do things, but if you have no other option, it's perfectly valid and it'll work just fine. Um, but basically, you want to mash the herb up and then you put the plantain directly over the bite. Now that's perfectly. If you're bugging out and you get bit by something or you get stung by something, and you see plantain on the ground, absolutely go ahead and grab that plantain rather than taking anything out of your kit, because then you're not wasting your supplies. You've got something right there. And plantain's magic happens in how fluid it is. When you start to break it up, you'll see that it's very liquidy. It's a very juicy herb. That's what I'm going for. And it's in that juice from the plant. That's where all that magic happens. So if you can get it fresh while you're walking around, that's even better. But of course, this is if you don't. Then you have it's just a salve. You make an infused oil with it, and then you make your salve by melting some beeswax into it. But at the end, I added quite a bit of tea tree and peppermint oils. And the reason why I did that is because tea tree does help to take the sting out, and peppermint does as well. And especially when you get a kid that got, bit by a horsefly. I can't stand these things. They're the bane of my existence. Whenever we go up to Maine, there's horseflies everywhere. And inevitably one of us gets bitten and it swells up and it's the big nasty welt, or you get those caterpillars that they're all nice and fuzzy, don't touch them, and you tell the kids don't touch that, but they're a kid and they see a fuzzy caterpillar and they gotta go touch it, right? So something like this, you could put the plantain salve on, and the tea tree and the peppermint oils are in there. I mean, barring that, you could do plantain and put some peppermint leaf in there when you were doing that as well. If you didn't have the essential oil, you could make a salve with that. The other option that you have for bug bites, and depending on the bite, this might be my preference, would be activated charcoal. Now, what I do is I have a jar of activated charcoal it's a plastic jar, and it has a bunch of well, I should say, let me be upfront. I have two plastic jars. One of them just has activated charcoal in it, and that's in case of accidental poisonings. And I need to be able to get in there with a spoon, and I have a plastic spoon. Whenever you go to those, well, hopefully you don't go to them often, but let's say you go out and you get fast food from somewhere and they give you a spoon and it's in a little wrapper. Save those things and put them aside, because what you want in your kit is, because they're in that plastic wrapping, so they're sanitary, right? So as opposed to just like grabbing a plastic spoon that you have at home or something. But when you deal with activated charcoal or bentonite clay, you don't want to use any metal. You want to use glass or plastic, and since we're not using glass for the kit, we're going to use plastic. So when you see those things, grab them, because then they go right in your first aid kit, um, or in your first aid supplies at home or wherever you're putting them. And I have I have a jar, I have a plastic jar that just has activated charcoal that's loose, and you have to there's a little bit of math involved. You have to calculate out how much you're going to give a person if there's an accidental poisoning. However, if we're talking about a bug bite, I have another jar where I've made capsules, and the reason I've done that is just in case, anything got really wet. And just in case somehow the jar was open, I don't want it to get, I don't want my charcoal to get wet. But the other thing is that when I make the capsules, they're 0, 0 size capsules. They're just the right amount of activated charcoal to cover most bug bites. And you can make a salve with activated charcoal, and I've done that, and that's fine. The only thing is that water is your neutral. And when you introduce oil to activated charcoal, it's not that it doesn't work at all, but it doesn't work as well. So activated charcoal works through adsorption, where it's sort of like it's a magnet for things that are toxic to us. That's sort of an oversimplification, but that's how it functions. So it kind of all sticks to the outside of the charcoal, as opposed to like absorption where it's being drawn into the charcoal. So what ends up happening is, you put this either on, let's say, a spider bite. If you're going to do that, also make sure that you've got some protective gloves in the kit. If you don't know what's bit somebody, it'd probably be better to have some gloves on. Also, this stuff is like one of the finest powders you'll ever use, and it's going to get into everything, which is another reason why I put them in capsules. Um, but it's just not worth it if you have to do that for accidental poisoning, because you'd end up using like 40 something individual capsules for like one dose of it to make this slurry that you get to drink. It's just better to get a teaspoon in there and do the math real quick to figure out how much activated charcoal a person needs. But for bug bites, what I end up doing is um, I'll take the cap, because remember, all the activated charcoal inside of this jar, they're all in capsules, so they're somewhat protected. But I'll take the cap from that jar and I'll open up the charcoal and I'll put it in, and I'll start dripping water. And I have these plastic pipettes. You can order them on Amazon. They're just plastic eyedroppers, okay? And just one drop at a time is literally all that you need. Um, I think maybe about 10 drops total, 10 to 15, somewhere in there, is plenty for one of these capsules, these 0, 0 size capsules of activated charcoal. And just to put it in one drop at a time. And you'll use like a plastic spoon. I saved you can certainly buy new ones, but I have kids, so I have all these baby spoons lying around. I had all these BPA-free little plastic baby spoons that were kicking around, serving absolutely no purpose. Well, they don't take up much room, and I can, put a couple of these in my kit, and that's fine. So that's what I use them for. So I just get these little baby spoons here. They're plastic, or you can use the plastic that has been, the plastic spoons that you got from the restaurant that's in the little plastic thing, the protector that I was just talking about. Um, but you mix that up together and you just mix the activated charcoal and the water, and then you apply it over the bug bite, or you apply it over any kind of skin irritant. If you notice a rash, like maybe something like poison ivy or poison oak or something, if you suspect that you walked through there, and now you're getting a rash and you don't know why you're getting a rash, and it's nothing that you ate because you haven't eaten in a long time, and it's not friction, it wasn't caused by friction, it wasn't caused by like overheating or sweat, and you suspect that you came in contact with something that was an irritant, you can certainly use activated charcoal for that. And then you might need to use, a few of the capsules for that, and if it's going to be over a wider area. The only thing is that it has to remain wet in order for this to continue to work. Once it dries out, it's not really doing anything. So there are some things that you can do to keep it wet a little bit longer, and that would be things like you could use some oh, what is something? Ground up flax seeds. You could use ground up chia seeds. They sell chia flour. These things absorb a ton of water, and they'll keep water around the charcoal for a little bit longer. I just can't be bothered to do it, so I generally don't. But it's possible. I just can't be bothered. Um, all I'll end up doing is I will just take my eyedropper and I'm just gonna drop more water right on the bandage, and it kind of seeps through and um, it keeps it wet. So what I'll do is I'll put it over the affected area, then I put some gauze over it, and then I'll just wrap it up. Um, Probably with like vet wrap or some other compression bandage, because it's going to rub off on everything. And I want to, if I have the option of putting plastic wrap around it, like if I'm home, then I'll do it. If I'm out and about, I don't put plastic wrap in my kit because that's just going to be messy, and it's that's not easy to carry with you, so I don't bother with it. But at home I would. And the plastic wrap will help prevent some of it evaporating away. Once it dries out, you need to remove it, and then if you want, you can reapply it. Another thing that you could do would be to add some type of a clay. Bentonite clay is also a wonderful thing to use for bug bites or skin irritations and rashes. You can use it for accidental poisoning too. It's not quite as good as the charcoal, but you can. It does adsorb. It does the exact same thing, but I prefer the charcoal for the accidental poisoning. Um, but let's say you've got some type of a weird rash going on, um, you don't know you don't know what it might be, you can add some clay to that. So bentonite clay is very effective. You could also add something like, um, oh, let's say, I'm trying to think, a French green clay or kaolin clay, or you could use any of these clays. Um, they will help to draw things out and to soothe the skin. Um, and many of them do a good job of holding on to water just a little bit longer than the charcoal does. But um, the thing is, when you mix the two of them, they're not quite as effective as if you just used either one on their own. So there's that to consider too. So I would encourage you to play with that and see how you like mixing charcoal with other clays, and see how they work on things like whether they're bug bites, bee stings, or um, acne, just to see how they work and how you like them. Next thing would be wounds. So what I decided on here is for abrasions, I made a salve that was made with comfrey, plantain, and gotu kola. And both comfrey and gotu kola are really wonderful cell proliferators, and they help to knit everything back together really, really well. And plantain is obviously very soothing and healing to the skin. That's why it's already been mentioned a whole bunch of times. Um, so I made a salve out of those, and that's really good for surface wounds like an abrasion. But you don't want to use those for things like punctures, because they tend to heal from the outside in, not the inside out, because they work so fast. And if you start applying things like comfrey and gotu kola to a deep wound, you may end up with like a big open socket underneath some healed over tissue, and that might have bacteria inside, and you may end up having to reopen that, and whoever you're trying to help is not going to like you very much. They're not going to want you to do that. So it's best to avoid having to reopen a wound. So instead, I like to take honey, and you can use it straight as is. You don't have to do anything to it. Honey on its own is its own first aid kit. If you have nothing else, you could just bring a bottle of honey and be able to handle a whole bunch of things. Um, but in this case, if you wanted to, you could infuse the honey with rose petals and calendula flowers and St. John's wort flowers, and that will help with wound healing as well. And St. John's wort also from the inside out, which is exactly how you want it to be. Now for bleeding, I mean, I have a wound powder that I've gotten very comfortable using, which is yarrow, chaparral. You could use anything that had berberine in it, but our guest last week, Chuck Hudson, is very very generous. He sends me chaparral from New Mexico all the, not all the time, but frequently enough. So I'm very happy to get that. But yarrow powder, chaparral powder, echinacea powder, and marshmallow root powders, and you just mix them all together in equal amounts. And you can either put that directly on something, something that's bleeding. Actually, if you had fresh yarrow that was out and about, and someone were bleeding, you could just crush up the leaves and put it directly on them. Um, Now, something that I would say about powders is that um, you can put an herbal powder directly on, like a laceration, something, a wound like that, and you don't really need to worry so much about washing it out. I used to be a little bit more fanatic about that, but you really don't need to. The body kind of works that stuff out, and it's just never been a real issue. And the other thing that I end up doing is, in order to apply it, a lot of times I'll mix that wound powder with honey, and as long as it's not bleeding, but I want to make sure, like if I have a wound that I'm concerned might, like it's stopped bleeding, but I want to make sure that it doesn't become infected, then I might take that exact same wound powder and I might mix it up with a bit of honey and then apply it that way. Then apply gauze and apply some other bandage, around that. Burns. Oh, I got to keep an eye on the time here. I'm running out of time. Burns. Aloe vera gel is very common. You can also take apple cider vinegar, or any vinegar for that matter, and infuse it with lavender, because vinegar will take the sting out of it. And you can also make a lavender plantain vinegar, and you could then spray that on to get rid of the sting of a sunburn. And you can store in a plastic bottle. And let me see. Oh, I've got 2 minutes left here, so um, I did not finish everything I wanted to get to. I thought I'd be able to. All right. I'm going to I'm going to complete the rest of it next week, but I have another topic next week that I want to talk about. I want to talk about prepping on the cheap next week. So if you're on a budget and you're trying to prep, that's where we're going with it next week. But I'm going to finish these up before we even start on that next week. Um, and I do have plenty more. I have plenty more remedies here that you really need to have in your kit. But we are at the end. If you like what you've heard, please do connect with me by following me on Facebook, Twitter, G+, Pinterest. Don't forget, subscribe to my YouTube channel and go to herbalprepper.com to subscribe to my newsletter. Thank you, everyone, for spending your time with me this evening. I hope that you got something out of it. This has been Kat, the Herbal Prepper with Herbal Prepper Live, and we will see you again next week.